Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Treasures Galore. My name is Michael Elder, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about Put In Below the Home of Brown. Now, if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me, and also, if you haven't watched my previous videos of my solve, you should check it out. So, I made a video about where warm waters halt. I believe it's Canyon Street or the border of Yellowstone, with the multiple instances in all three books, and then take it in the canyon down. I believe you have to use mountain man logic, so that would mean you go north and then west. Now, not far, but too far to walk. Now, I went over how far I believe that is, and I believe it is 50 miles, with the countless instances of the number 50, and most importantly, 50 as being a distance. And the chapter, The Long Ride Home, which I believe the keyword's home, and he's talking about the long ride to the home of Brown. Now, this is going to be a different take on what people think the home of Brown is. Like I said, I'm just going strictly off the books. So, and also Cynthia posted, I believe it was her, that none of the 9 clues can be structures. She said Forrest Fenn ruled that out. Now, Forrest Fenn has never came out to, you know, the search community and say, no, none of the clues can be structures. He just said the chest isn't hidden near or in a structure. So the other clues can be structures, which I believe the home of Brown is a structure. And also, I believe that the home of Brown has to be something that occurs a lot in the Rocky Mountains. Because if you're going off of Famous Brown or something like that, let's say Molly Brown, well, you could start in the middle of the poem. You can't start in the middle of the poem like Forrest Fenn has told us, because the home of Brown occurs a lot. Or, the home of Brown, as in what it is, not where it is, occurs a lot through the Rocky Mountains. That's why you have to start at where warm waters halt and follow the clues, and then once you get to not far but too far to walk, you're going to see the home of Brown, probably in close proximity. But again, you always put in below. You never get to the home of Brown. Or maybe it's just south of. So anyways, I want to talk about home of Brown and how I believe it is a barn. Now, before you laugh at that, just hear me out on what I see in the books. And, kind of just let me explain, because he does use the word brown a lot. And to me, he knows that people are going to be looking at every time he mentions the word brown. They've been going through it with a fine-tooth comb. So, maybe it is too obvious, maybe it's not too obvious. But I believe that he's telling us that the home of Brown is a barn. Now let's get started in the thrill of the chase. In the chapter Jumpstarting the Learning Curve, page 26, and I'm going to read. It was easy to justify the time I spent in Spanish class by looking out the big window that was adjacent to my desk. It was on the second floor, and a beautiful old iron slide-down fire escape was just outside that window. When the sun was out, the smell of freedom was more than I could resist. So on occasion, when Miss Ford was writing Spanish words on the blackboard, I quickly slipped through the window, down and away. I was proud to have thought of that idea all by myself. I remember the exhilarating feeling that there were probably a lot more ideas out there that were just as good as that one. Fortunately, I was the only one in class who knew that trick. The sliding, I mean. And even though that rusty old iron thing marked the tail of my breeches pretty good with a heavy brown color, it was worth it. Everyone who walked behind me on the way to the next class knew what I had done. People were beginning to notice me. So, the word brown, he would sneak out of the window and slide down this fire escape, and it would mark his pants with a heavy brown color. Now, this is the meat and potatoes of why I believe it is a barn. And it's the next chapter, literally the next page. Bessie and me, page 29. My father got a Guernsey calf that grew up to be a beautiful, fawn-colored animal. We called her Bessie. I loved that old cow, and it was fun to milk her before school and again after supper. And so he talks about, Bessie and how he would go in the barn. Like all the cats in the neighborhood knew when I was in the barn, and they would come running. So, beautiful fawn-colored animal. What is fawn? Fawn is a light yellowish brown color. So, in this chapter, where is the home of this beautiful fawn-colored animal? Well, it would be the barn. So, down in this page, it says, one cold morning when Bessie was further in the barn. So your effort will be worth the cold. He's using the keywords to hint that maybe this is important. So he says, he's talking about milking Bessie, and he tied her tail to his milking stool, and so it wouldn't club him when he was, milking her. So it says, until you loved a cow, part of your soul remains undiscovered. Miss Ford, here, let me start earlier. But there must have been some big flies around, because she swished that tail so hard that the stool went flying, making me fall into a fresh cow pie. Until you loved a cow, part of your soul remains undiscovered. Miss Ford suggested that maybe next time I should change my pants before class, and it was just like her to say something like that. If she'd known I was running late for school, she might not have said anything. Sometimes teachers just don't understand. So what I think is interesting in this, so his beautiful fawn-colored animal, and she lived in the barn, so home of Brown, right? But in the chapter before this, he talks about his pants getting marked with a heavy brown color. And then in this next chapter, he's talking about falling into a cow pie, and his teacher said he should change pants. So again, his pants are marked with a brown color, or, a poop stain cover. So that, it kind of tied those two together, like, hey, why is his pants marked with a brown color? And maybe that means that the home of Brown is a barn. But let me continue in the thrill of the chase. So, in my previous video, I talked about stout-hearted men and running through fields and crossing barbed wire fences. So he says, to avoid detection, I ran full speed across an open field, crying all the way, until I reached a small county road that led back home. I remember falling twice while trying to get through the dumb barbed wire fence. So he fell twice trying to get through the fence. Well, he took 2 trips, right? And I just think that's interesting. So he crosses a barbed wire fence. So later in this chapter, he says, the little county farm to market roads in that area were short and had many intersections, and it wasn't easy catching a ride in the direction I needed to go. So that night I slept under a tree with cows grazing all around. It was a threshold moment in my life, but I didn't know it at the time. So this was a threshold moment in his life. So he runs through this field, crosses a barbed wire fence, and he spent the night just in this field under a tree, and there was cows all around. Well, if there's cows all around, then it would make sense that there might be a barn somewhere in the vicinity. Maybe not, but it just brings my mind, okay, this is a threshold moment in his life. He ran through this field, sat under a tree, and spent the night there, and it was a threshold moment in his life. And He didn't know it at the time. Maybe he knew it was a threshold moment when he got cancer. And this is the spot that he thought about. So cows were grazing all around, and I slept under a tree. Now, in my mind, that is where the treasure chest is hidden. It's not by some, river Madison or something like that. Or maybe it's close to the Madison. But, like Baker's Hole, like these famous search spots, the fire hole. A lot of people are thinking that. But we don't know what place is special to Forrest. This was a threshold moment in his life, and would people think to, cross a barbed wire fence just in this random field and run through it, and then just under this tree, it's marked, and then, the treasure chest is hidden right there, under a rock, or maybe it's buried. You got to use the backward bicycle. Everyone's going this way, but what if it is just hidden in a field under a tree, and the home of Brown is a barn? Okay, so let's continue in Too Far to Walk. Now, there's a few other instances that I'm not going to bring up, but anyways, so let's go to Too Far to Walk, chapter 21. I wish I hadn't. Now, in this chapter, I've talked about this, and it was in Take It in the Canyon Down, because he says the canyon about 8 times in this, and he uses the word like zest for the chase, and I pulled the mountain lion up and out of the canyon, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So he's talking about, the canyon. And then in the illustration, if you look in his belt buckle, on page 98, it looks like it says either clues or clever or clues, which I think is interesting. So let me read in this chapter, page 101. Mountain lions were eating so many cows and calves in the 1960s that the Cattlemen's Association offered a $50 bounty for each one killed. So he's talking about the canyon, up and out, so northwest in this canyon, and he uses the number $50 bounty, and then he's talking about cows. Mountain lions were eating so many cows. So what if that's a sentence just hinting at all 3 of those that I mentioned? The canyon, how far is not far but too far to walk, and what is the home of Brown? Cows, 50, northwest. Okay, so let's continue moving on in Too Far to Walk. So this is page 207, and it is the chapter $17 a square inch. So on page 207, I'm going to read the bottom paragraph. And once when we had a few minutes to kill while waiting to lunch with me, he made a wonderful mural on the curved plaster wall in the adjacent gallery guest house bedroom. It portrayed an old country outhouse in a brownish red landscape with a barn and some trees. Now I know he says that the outhouse was in a brownish red housescape, but he also mentions with a barn and some trees. So the word brown, and then he mentions a barn. Brown and barn. Home of Brown. So the last thing I want to mention in Too Far to Walk is he's talking about flying, his Piper Malibu Mirage, and he says, my destination was not something I had to worry about for at least 600 miles. I didn't have to use my radio after the wheels came up, and about 100 feet above the trees, I could see a lot of things disappear under my wings. Moose, grizzly bears, teepee rings, and cowboys riding behind a few head of cattle. I felt like John Wayne. So he's talking about heading north and looking and being able to see cows getting roped up by the ranchers. Okay. Next is Once Upon a While. And there's only yeah, there's only a few instances in this, but they're interesting. So, Too Far to Walk, page 134. He says, the small white ranch in northern Arizona was sparse of grass, which interpolated, I'd probably butcher that word, into few cows. So Tucker found comfort in the saddle, wandering through the tangled cedar branch or brakes, trying to find newborn calves ahead of the mountain lions that were constantly on the prowl. Now I know mountain lions and ranchers, don't like mountain lions. And so, it's a common thing for, ranchers to kill them or hire people, and, they like to keep the population down. But I think it's interesting that he's talking about, the mountain lions that were constantly on their prowl killing cows. And that brought me back to, Too Far to Walk, talking about he got a $50 bounty from the Cattlemen's Association if he killed one. So those two chapters, kind of tie in together, and it makes sense. Okay, so this is the last one I want to get at, and it is page 149. Okay, so it says, well, what do you say to a woman like that? I thought of her fawn-like brown eyes, and remembered they weren't enough to attract the admiration of even the most indifferent. So, fawn-like brown eyes brings you back to his beautiful fawn-colored animal, his cow that lived in the barn. So let's go to Terry Scant, and I'm going to wrap this video up. So it says, Dear Forrest, in your book, The Thrill of the Chase, you mentioned how great your brother Skippy was. Did you ever learn what happened to the plane he flew into Hebgen Lake? Don. Thanks for asking, Don. Or thanks for asking such an easy question, Don. The family never learned what happened to that airplane or where it came from. It wasn't a big deal because of who Skippy was and how he operated. Things like that were almost expected. I thought he was a genius. He may have invented ESP if he had lived long enough. During the war, my dad had a barn where we kept Bessie, our cow. Skippy was about 16. He nailed a large, flat piece of tin to the wall and smeared it with cow manure to attract flies. So it's a really funny story, but I'm going to stop reading there. So he's talking about his dad had a barn where they kept their cow, Bessie. So again, and then he's talking about cow manure, just like in the chapter in The Thrill of the Chase, how he fell and smeared his pants with cow manure. So that's the reason why I believe the home of Brown is a barn. Now, there's a lot of different things you can tie into the home of Brown with the book. There's mentions of the brown rusty color, and once upon a while he mentions I think it's talking about these chicken statues and how they're rusty and brown, and that chapter is pretty interesting because it uses like 6 words from the poem like in 2 paragraphs. So I'll bring that up in another video, but it's just interesting. So I mean, if you're going off the books, what can you tie back to Home of Brown? If there is a hint about the Home of Brown, now I believe that there's a hint for every single clue in the poem, and even more. I believe he fully explains the poem in the book. Now I may be wrong about that. Maybe he just leads you to where warm waters halt, and then after that, the poem's straightforward, and you can find it like that. Maybe. But if we're going to walk with confidence and walk straight to it, then there has to be some guidance and directions of what these clues mean, because you can interpret them a million different ways. So I believe that the thrill of the chase gives you those answers. And from the thrill of the chase and the other memoirs, you know, it seems logical to me that the home of Brown could be a barn. And I showed you how I tied that back to, what I thought in my solve. And so in my next video, I'll talk about exactly where I put in, and it's kind of synonymous with no place for the meek. So if you follow the clues, Canyon Street, go north and then west, not far but too far to walk, 50 miles, and then Home Brown, a barn. And I'll go over no place for the meek and exactly where on Google Earth I was and where I searched. But I'm not saying I'm right. I went and searched. It's not there. So this solve is wrong. But maybe the home of Brown is a barn. And, the people that have been with 200 or 500 feet, maybe that's the point on where people went astray. So maybe this will help someone. Maybe it won't. Maybe you won't like this idea at all. But to me, using the book, it makes sense. It makes sense that this could possibly be a home of Brown. And I know it's a lot different than, Brown Trout or Molly Brown or, Joe Brown's put in. And I know that. But, maybe it's some different thinking that might get this thing solved. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helps someone out there. Hopefully we can get this treasure found. And maybe not this summer since we're shut down completely. But, hopefully this helps someone. And if you do like my videos, please subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. It'd be awesome to get to 1,000 subscribers. And, it's kind of just been a goal of mine. So if you are watching this, please subscribe and hit that the red button and then click on the notifications bell so you can get notifications. And so make sure to tune in Friday. Me and Carter are going live on his channel, The House Husband Diaries. So if you haven't checked his YouTube channel out, check it out and subscribe to him. So, and I appreciate it. I really, really enjoy making these videos, and I enjoy getting feedback and talking to people, even if you're the person that, dislikes my video without even listening to it. Just thank you for watching it. Thank you for everything, the positive and the negative. If you're keeping it civil, I'm alright with that. I'm not saying my thoughts are right. I'm not saying that everyone's wrong. I'm just saying I'm reading the book, and this is what I see, and hopefully it will help someone out. So, anyways, guys, that's it for this video. I'm going to do my next video is going to be it's going to be my book review on the book titled 80 by Eric Salone. And I think it'll be kind of a quick video. There are some interesting things in that, but just in my humble opinion, I do not believe it has anything of value besides him talking about or Eric Salone being obsessed with barns. So, anyways, that's it. So next video is my book review, and then on 80, and then I'm going to do a book review on The Catcher in the Rye. I've just started reading that. I had a searcher email me and tell me some interesting things that were in the book, so it got me, invigorated to actually read it for, third time. But okay, well, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.